Hello and welcome, my dudes. It's your boy Sultan Skinny, Caliph of all that's lean and politically unclean. To a Bedouin Arab, there is nothing more important than your tribal lineage. It is where you get your name, honor, and pride from. So, knowing and maintaining your family tree is essential to being a respectable Arab. For a Bedouin, his immediate family is priority number one. After that is the clan, and after that is the tribe. For thousands of years, the Arabs identified and separated themselves on these tribal lines. There were no institutions, laws, or politics, just different family units competing and negotiating over basic necessities like food, water, and even women. However, the Prophet Muhammad's revelation of Islam sought to change this chaotic lifestyle by establishing a community and nation the Arabs could call their own. There was now one God instead of many, a set of rules and regulations to follow, and a political identity for the Arabs to belong to. In his lifetime, Muhammad would see nearly the entire Arabian Peninsula under the rule of the Ummah. But then in 632 CE, Muhammad died, leaving the Arabs a new empire and religion, but with no plan for succession. A people who had no concept of nationhood now had to govern themselves as an empire. But who among the Muslims was to carry out Muhammad's vision? How would a successor, Caliph, be appointed? What would Muhammad have wanted in this situation? These questions would forever haunt the minds of Muslims and establish the different sects of Islam that divide the religion today. In the end, however, the history of the Islamic Caliphate would be dictated by the very same forces it sought to eliminate: the tribalism of the Arab Bedouins. If you want to understand anything that's going on in this episode, you need to follow who is related to who. Muhammad's tribe were the Quraysh, a loose union of Hijazi clans that were responsible for protecting the Kaaba, once a holy site for pagans and now the holiest site in Islam. Although belonging to the same tribe, it is important to remember that the majority of the Quraysh were against Muhammad and his followers. The idea of no longer worshipping idols threatened the Kaaba business that made the Quraysh wealthy. Most of the battles involving Muhammad and the early Muslims were against their fellow Quraysh tribesmen. Because of this history, many of Muhammad's followers thought it would be best that those within Muhammad's clan, the Hashemites, would be the ones to succeed him. With no surviving sons to inherit his empire, Muhammad's cousin Ali was the candidate of choice. Being the only living male member of Muhammad's family, a devout Muslim, and husband to the Prophet's daughter, Fatima, Ali seemed like the perfect choice to become Caliph. But according to the majority of Muslims, Muhammad would not have wanted it to be this way. According to Sunni tradition, the position of Caliph was never supposed to be hereditary. An empire ruled under the principles of God shouldn't be ruled by a dynasty. Instead, the Caliph should be elected among the members of the Quraysh tribe in order to maintain unity within the confederacy. The Ansar warriors of Medina, the Quraysh of Mecca, and some of Muhammad's closest companions gathered in a building known as the Saqifa. In this meeting, the council elected one of Muhammad's closest friends, Abu Bakr, to be appointed Caliph. Abu Bakr was one of the Prophet's most trusted and loyal companions. He had followed Muhammad during the Hijrah, fought by his side in battle, and was widely regarded as second in command after the Prophet himself. Abu Bakr was also Muhammad's father-in-law, having gave his 6-year-old daughter Aisha for Muhammad to marry after the death of Khadijah. As crazy as giving up your 6-year-old daughter to a grown man is, this was, and in many cases still is, a normal thing for people to do, whether it be in Arabia or elsewhere in the world. Marriages were seen more as a political contract than an act of love, as it brings clans and tribes closer together. In fact, Professor William Montgomery Watt would tell you that Abu Bakr was probably consolidating his position in the Ummah by giving his daughter to Muhammad. Regardless of these connections, however, the decision to appoint Abu Bakr as Caliph was made without Muhammad's family. This would forever cause a divide within the Ummah, with Sunnis believing that the election of Abu Bakr was the correct choice, and the Shi'atu Ali, literally Party of Ali, insisting that only Muhammad's family should be fit to rule. Governing from their capital in Medina, Abu Bakr's 2-year reign as Caliph was eventful. His rule was met with opposition from other Arab tribes claiming that their leaders were prophets of their own. These events became known as the Rida Wars, resulting in Abu Bakr and his armies crushing these rebellions and false prophets. Leading the Caliphate's army was Khalid ibn al-Walid, a very talented general who consistently defeated armies far larger and better equipped than his own. Under Abu Bakr's reign, al-Walid would take down rebels and begin expanding the Caliphate's territory outside of Arabia. After dying from natural causes, Abu Bakr was succeeded by Umar, who took expansion to a whole new level. He, al-Walid, and other generals would take the entirety of the Levant, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Iran, humiliating the Byzantines and completely absorbing the Sasanians into the Ummah. Umar himself was a pretty solid general who often led his troops into battle, but he was nowhere near as great a commander as al-Walid. Most of the territory gained during Umar's reign was a result of Walid's generalship. He was extremely popular with his soldiers, leading them into victory and awarding them with the spoils of war. This popularity with the troops made Umar uneasy about Walid. Umar and his council dismissed Walid from his position as general and governor of Syria. Al-Walid accepted this without putting up a fight. Throughout his time as general of the Muslim armies, Al-Walid managed to win a total of 28 battles, making him the greatest military commander of his time, beating out legends like Julius Caesar, Sun Tzu, and even Alexander the Great. For over 1,000 years, Al-Walid would hold the record for the most battles won by a military commander. It would not be until the early 1800s that his record would be beaten by Great Britain's Arthur Wesley and France's Napoleon Bonaparte. Under Umar's leadership as Caliph, the Ummah was beginning to look like a true empire. On top of conquering the most powerful empires of their day, Umar had established provinces, a tax and welfare system, and infrastructure projects across his empire. However, the administrative reform that Umar is best known for is the codifying of Islamic law. Because religion and state are one and the same, the Quran, along with other Islamic texts, needed to have their messages and rules implemented as law. What developed from this was fiqh, the study of Sharia. Not only would this new field of law delve into how Islamic courts and proceedings should be conducted, but because of its theological implications, Muslim jurists would also debate on topics such as the nature of God, the soul, and free will. This makes fiqh just as much a field of philosophy and metaphysics as it is one of law and religion. While praying in Medina's Al-Masjid al-Nabawi mosque, Umar was assassinated by a Persian slave whose motivation would forever remain a mystery. After his death, Umar would be succeeded by a guy named Uthman. Uthman belonged to a clan known as the Umayyads, a longtime rival of Muhammad's early Muslim movement. Unlike his predecessor, Uthman was not a commander. He didn't lead his armies or have any experience in government. Instead, he gave his generals more control of the army, essentially allowing them to attack and raid whoever they wanted. Despite having gained more territory, expanded trade, and even commenced the standardization of the Quran, Uthman's reign is often remembered as a corrupt and unjust one. Uthman appointed members of his own Umayyad clan to become high-ranking officials and governors, concentrating the power and wealth of the empire within his own family circle. For the Arabs, let alone one specific clan, to think of themselves as better than everyone else was extremely un-Islamic. Muhammad had preached equality among all men, not women, of all ethnicities. Many Muslims, Arab and non-Arab alike, would share this grievance of Uthman not adhering to what their prophet had preached. Rebellion and revolt was common during Uthman's reign, particularly in Egypt. To solve this, Uthman asked all of his governors to meet with him in Medina. But in the absence of the Egyptian governor, his deputy staged a coup d'etat, sending the Egyptian rebels over to Medina to overthrow the Caliphate. The rebels laid siege to Uthman's house, killing him in front of his family. After the death of Uthman, the Caliphate was once again without a leader, but this time with far more rebels and dissidents. In desperate need of a new leader, the Council of Medina and Muhammad's companions begged Ali to become the new Caliph. Originally, Ali didn't want anything to do with the position, but seeing as he was the most popular with the rebel factions and to Shias the rightful Imam, he begrudgingly accepted this responsibility. After becoming Caliph, Ali was facing a whole new level of turmoil within the empire. On top of having to please the dissidents he inherited from Uthman's administration, Ali's leadership was being challenged by Muawiyah, the governor of Syria. Muawiyah was Uthman's cousin and was extremely sour about his death. He demanded that Ali punish the rioters who killed Uthman. Muawiyah's allies included the other two candidates for Caliph, al-Zubayr and al-Talha, as well as Aisha, Muhammad's widow wife. Yeah, remember the 6-year-old who got married off? Well, she actually becomes very important to the rest of this story. Aisha led an army into Basra, demanding that Ali hand over the people who killed Uthman. When Ali could not deliver, her army took the city and executed hundreds of Muslims. Ali riled an army in Basra and attacked Aisha's troops in the Battle of the Camel. In the end, Ali emerged victorious, sending Aisha in retreat and moving the capital from Medina to the Iraqi city of Kufa. Having secured Iraq, Ali wanted Muawiyah to pledge allegiance to him. Muawiyah refused, teaming up with the governor of Egypt, Amr al-As, to stand against Ali's caliphate. Ali marched over with an army to confront Muawiyah and Amr in Siffin, Syria. The Battle of Siffin was days of intense fighting. The fighting was so intense that the two warring parties agreed to resolve the conflict through arbitration, in which representatives of each fighting side would discuss the terms of peace and determine who won the battle. A minority of Ali's army hated this idea. They believed that only God should determine a victor, not mortal individuals at some summit meeting. They wanted Ali to fight to the death, but it was clear that peace and unity within the Ummah was the Caliph's main priority. These dissidents within Ali's army went rogue, becoming known as the Hajarites. These guys became their own Islamic sect and another military force for Ali to fight. They believe that a Muslim of any ethnicity has the right to be an imam, as long as they are pious. If the imam was to sin, it would be the duty of Muslims to depose him, and for the Hajarites, Ali was no longer fit to be their ruler. Ali would defeat the Hajarites in the Battle of Naharawan in 658 CE. But winning battles doesn't necessarily win wars. In 661 CE, while praying at the great mosque of Kufa during the holy month of Ramadan, Ali was assassinated by a Hajarite. Ali's death would be remembered in Islamic history as the end of the Rashidun Caliphate. These four caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, are referred to as the Rashiduns not so much for their administrative achievements, but for how they became caliphs in the first place. All four of these caliphs were elected by a council based on their credentials and merit, not their bloodline. But after Ali, this would all change, and the Islamic Empire, as a result, would also change. With Ali gone, the Shias appointed his son Hassan to be the new caliph. But Hassan wasn't interested in continuing to fight a war that had left so many Muslims dead and the Ummah divided. Instead, Hassan met up with Muawiyah to sign a peace treaty. Under this treaty, Hassan would grant Muawiyah the title of caliph, under the conditions that the next caliph be elected by Muslims and not the caliph himself. Muawiyah would be ceremonially crowned as caliph in the city of Jerusalem in 661 CE, ushering in the age of the Umayyad dynasty, named after the broken promise Muawiyah made to Hassan. Muawiyah moved the empire's capital to the city of Damascus, where he was based during his time as governor. During his time as caliph, he would continue to wage war against the Byzantines in Africa and Armenia, expanding his already massive empire. Muawiyah designated his son Yazid to be the next caliph in 680. On hearing this news, Hussein, Hassan's younger brother, marched from Mecca to Kufa in order to gather supporters and challenge Yazid's rule. Yazid and his forces were able to intercept Hussein and his small band of supporters near the city of Karbala. There, Hussein and his supporters would fight for their lives against a much larger Umayyad army, beginning what is known as the Second Fitna. In the end, Hussein was left without a head and Yazid victorious. But Yazid's problems were far from over. Abd Allah ibn al-Zubayr was the grandson of Abu Bakr. He rallied up his own supporters and proclaimed himself as the legitimate caliph, being based in the city of Mecca. Yazid would die in 683 CE, and his son Muawiyah II would not live to become caliph for even a year, so there was another succession crisis all over again. For a moment, it looked like Zubayr was actually going to become the official caliph, ending the rule of the Umayyads. He was very popular with Muslims due to his relationship with the Prophet and his promise of making the caliphate uninheritable again. This guy had support all over the empire, from Egypt to Iran, Yemen to northern Syria. But the cousin of Muawiyah I, Marwan, stepped up to become the next Umayyad caliph. Marwan was an experienced general and managed to take Egypt back from Zubayr's supporters. Marwan would die in 685 CE, appointing his son Abd al-Malik to be his successor. Among Zubayr's original supporters, a guy named al-Mukhtar decided it would be best to start his own rival caliphate in Iraq, taking Armenia and much of western Iran. And to make things more complicated, the Khazarites also joined in the fun, taking what is now central Saudi Arabia and southern Iran. Chaos ensued, and all of these different parties were fighting each other. Al-Mukhtar and the Khazarites would be taken down by al-Zubayr, and al-Zubayr would be taken down by Abd Malik's troops, taking the city of Mecca in 692 CE. Abd Malik was left the last caliph standing, ending the second fitna with an Umayyad victory. After having defeated insurgents, false prophets, and rival caliphs, the Umayyads could now focus on making their empire bigger and better. During their reign, the Umayyads would expand the Islamic Empire's realm to its fullest extent, stretching from the Indus rivers in the east and the Atlantic coast to the west. The language of classical Arabic would have its debut, being found on the first Islamic coins and early Islamic literature. Dope buildings such as the Palace of Anjar, the Dome of the Rock, and the Great Damascus Mosque were being built to show off the wealth and prestige of this new imperial power. Being the rulers of the world's most powerful empire, the Umayyads were living very lavish lives. A little too lavish. Having private palaces to host parties and orgies cost a lot of money to maintain, and with more and more people becoming Muslim, the funds from the jizya tax were not what they used to be. The Umayyads started to get greedy and reformed the jizya tax so that it would include all non-Arabs. As you could imagine, this policy did not sit well with the rest of the empire, not only because taxes were being raised, but this policy was also straight up racist, going against the teachings of Islam, as all Muslims are to be seen as equals. Rebellions and revolts were starting up again, and the Umayyads were now in the midst of a third fitna. Although in the end victorious, the Umayyad dynasty was coming to a close. The corruption of the Umayyads bothered most people within the empire, but not as much as the Shias, who had been telling everyone from the start that if the Caliph was someone from Muhammad's clan, none of this stuff would have happened. If the Caliph could trace their lineage to the Prophet Muhammad, then they would be obligated to honor their ancestor, and thus the faith he brought into the world. Claiming to be related to one of Muhammad's uncles, Abbas, the Abbasids, as they came to be known, managed to take control of the Khorasan province in 746 CE. Allied with Shias and many non-Muslims, a Persian general named Abu Muslim led an army to Mesopotamia to challenge the Umayyads and install a caliph who was related to Abbas. The Abbasids brutally killed their opponents, waving a black flag in opposition to the Umayyad white. After defeating the Umayyads in Iraq, Syria, and Egypt, Abdul Abbas as-Safa was proclaimed caliph in the city of Kufa, Ali's former capital, in 750 CE. This would mark the beginning of the Abbasid Caliphate, but not the end of the Umayyads, as they would continue to rule in the Iberian Peninsula, creating their own rival caliphate in Europe. But the Abbasids were, without a doubt, the new rulers of the Islamic world, and really the rest of the world. The Abbasids would defeat the Tang Chinese Empire in battle, taking most of Central Asia. The successor to as-Safa, al-Mansur, would further consolidate Abbasid power. Al-Mansur executed Abu Muslim, the guy who got the Abbasids in power in the first place. He also backstabbed the Shias, who supported the Abbasids, making them once again a persecuted group within the empire. Although having treated the Muslims who helped them badly, the Abbasids were very popular with other religious groups, being advocates of ethnic equality and granting more freedoms and rights to Muslims and non-Muslims alike. In 762 CE, al-Mansur would begin the construction of a new city. This city would be just north of Ctesiphon, the former capital of the Sasanian Empire. After 4 years of construction, the city of Baghdad became the new capital city of the Islamic Empire. On top of being the new imperial capital, Baghdad would become the intellectual center of the world, with the Caliphate providing government funding for scientific research and writing. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid would commission the construction of the Bayt al-Hikmah, a humongous library where scholars and scientists from all over the world would come to conduct research, engage in debate, and teach pupils. The reign of the Abbasids would forever be remembered as the golden age of Islam, where Muslims were at the forefront of world learning, literature, science, wealth, and power. With over a century of turmoil and violent tribal blood feuds, the Islamic Empire overcame its troubled past to become the forerunners of the future. The Muslims were now the envy of the medieval world. This jealousy of Muslim success, however, would last much longer than the Caliphate itself, all the way into the modern age. And out of all the 7 sins, envy is by far the most pathetic. Next episode, we take on the blasphemous and most unorthodox claims by one of the internet's most famous atheists, Sam Harris. We will see why Sam thinks the Islamic Golden Age is just as phony as he is ignorant. For you see, my friends, it's real easy to diss and criticize Islam, especially when you have absolutely no clue what you're talking about.